Just the vax, ma'am. In this sketch, we're going to talk all about vaccines. We'll talk briefly about each childhood vaccine and its schedule, and we'll highlight special populations who should or should not receive them. In this video, we'll talk about vaccines for kids from birth through 6 years old, and the next video will cover 7 to 18 years old. Alright, let's get down to brass vax. Welcome to Maxine's Toys, a purveyor of what you'll soon find to be an eclectic assortment of products to amaze and delight children from 0 to 6 years old. Way back when Maxine's was founded, Maxine organized her shelves and carpet to look just like the CDC immunization schedules. In retrospect, this was a weird choice, but she didn't have much in the way of interior design experience. Anyway, keep that in mind as we browse the store. At Maxine's Toys, boredom has been nearly eliminated. And like Maxine's, vaccines are incredibly effective. Since the introduction of routine childhood immunizations, the number of cases of most vaccine-preventable illnesses in the United States has declined by over 90%. Not only do vaccines directly benefit the immunized child, but they also provide what's called herd immunity. Herd immunity, or community immunity, say that 10 times fast, is achieved when the percentage of the population that is immune to the infection is large enough to decrease the risk of transmission to other unimmunized people. This is named after the way that once a herd of giraffes is large enough, even the littlest giraffes are protected from the lions. Or something like that. Before we get into the vaccines themselves, let's chat a bit about when to vaccinate preterm infants. The immunization schedules, dosing, and intervals are the same for preterm infants born at less than 37 weeks and those born full term. In other words, preemies should follow the routine vaccine schedule according to their chronological age, which should not be corrected for the gestational age at birth. Interestingly, this also applies to premature birds. As the famous old saying goes, the early bird gets the vax. The only exception to all of this is the hepatitis B vaccine, which we'll talk about first. Let's jump on in. Peace, love, and vaccinations, man. That hippie is there to remind you that Hep B is a pretty important disease. It's also particularly important at childbirth, when vertical transmission can occur from mother to child. For more about Hep B and a whole lot of hippie jokes, check out our sketchy micro video. In this sketch, we're going to stick to the vaccines. The Hep B vaccine is intramuscular and inactivated, but you won't see that symbolized anywhere. That's because most of these vaccines are the same. So instead, we'll only symbolize cases where the administration is different. The Hep B vaccine is administered routinely within 24 hours of birth, so it's on the birth shelf. The second dose is given again at 1 to 2 months of life, so it's on that shelf, and the final dose is given at 6 to 18 months of life, which is why the doll's pull string extends under the 6 to 18 month shelves. And as a heads up, the rest of the toys in this sketch will be placed on or under the shelves of the age the vaccine is administered. As we mentioned, the hepatitis B vaccine is the only one with special consideration in premature infants. For infants whose birth weight is less than 2 kilograms, the hepatitis B vaccine is given either at 1 month chronological age or at hospital discharge, whichever comes first. That hippie baby doll actually looks pretty cool, but honestly, the discharge makes it a hard pass. The routine schedule assumes the infant's mother is hepatitis B surface antigen negative. Infants born to a mother who is surface antigen positive should receive both the vaccine and hepatitis B immune globulin administered at different sites within 12 hours of birth. The same is administered to preterm infants born at less than 2 kilograms. However, the vaccine should not count towards completion of their 3-dose series. The hepatitis B vaccine is very safe and well tolerated. The most frequently reported side effects are pain at the injection site, erythema, and fever. As you can imagine, these are side effects most commonly reported for all vaccines, so we're not going to keep mentioning them. From now on, we'll stick to particularly unique side effects. Okay, put down the tie-dye and get ready for Hanukkah. We're going to take a spin on over to rotavirus. Rotavirus is the most common cause of severe acute gastroenteritis worldwide. That sounds merely unpleasant, but before the introduction of a vaccine, rotavirus was responsible for more than 400,000 deaths and over 2 million hospitalizations per year in children under 5. That's a lot. But fortunately, There's a vaccine. Specifically, it's a live attenuated vaccine that's given orally. But more importantly, do you know anyone with spare tickets to the Rafa concert? I've seen him live before, and he's amazing. I love his songs like Baby Bleomycin and Potassium Phone. The rotavirus vaccine, called Rotarix, or R1, is monovalent and is given at 2 and 4 months. Easy peasy, no more diarrhea. Okay, my bad. It's actually not that easy. In fact, there are 2 different versions of the vaccine. In addition to Rotarix, there's also Rotatec. Rotatec, or R5, which is pentavalent, is a 3-dose series and is given at 2, 4, and 6 months. The rotavirus series should not be started on infants 15 weeks or older, and the series should be completed by 8 months. This is simply because the safety of the first dose in older infants has not been studied. All those dreidels must mean it's the holiday season at Maxine's, which is why there's an elf with a 6-shaped hat and candy discharge capabilities. Wait, no, the elf is there to remind you that premature infants can receive their first dose of the rotavirus vaccine as early as 6 weeks old, if they are being discharged from the NICU. This is to reduce rotavirus shedding in immunized infant stool, which may pose a risk of transmission to clinically unstable and unvaccinated infants in the hospital. One super rare but notable side effect of the rotavirus vaccine is intussusception, which is usually seen within 3 to 14 days of the vaccine. What exactly causes that telescoping of the bowel isn't clear, but it is thought to be the result of either intestinal inflammation, lymphoid hyperplasia, or alterations in motility. So, you won't be shocked to hear that one contraindication to rotavirus vaccine is a history of intussusception, just like you'd never buy that fleshy telescope ever in a million years. Don't give the rotavirus vaccine to a kid with a history of intussusception. Other contraindications include a history of anaphylaxis to the vaccine itself, anaphylaxis to latex, and severe combined immunodeficiency syndrome, aka SCID. Okay, well, if you're sure you're done talking about diarrhea, I guess we can move on. You know what kids are all about these days? Tap dancing. Or, as they call it in their hip kid lingo, D-tapping. DTaP is a combined vaccine against diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. Since these vaccines were first developed in the 1940s, the U.S. has seen a considerable decline in all 3 diseases. All right, let's take a deep breath. You're about to give a ton of shots. DTaP is a 5-dose series given at 2, 4, and 6 months, 15 to 18 months, and 4 to 6 years. Be aware that there is a risk of febrile seizure after DTaP vaccination, and this risk is increased if the vaccine is given on the same day as influenza and pneumococcal vaccines. As always, history of anaphylaxis to a previous DTaP vaccine is a contraindication to vaccination. But that's pretty obvious. More notably, a history of encephalopathy that developed within 7 days of a previous dose of the vaccine without another identifiable cause is also a contraindication. Okay, we're D-tapping out. Let's fly right along to Haemophilus influenzae type B, or HIB as we'll refer to it from now until the heat death of the universe. HIB, represented by our recurring H biplane, was once the most common cause of bacterial meningitis and a common cause of invasive infections like epiglottitis, pneumonia, and septic arthritis in early childhood. Amazingly, widespread use of HIB vaccination has nearly eliminated invasive HIB disease in children in the United States. The HIB vaccine is a 2 or 3-dose series, depending on the vaccine formulation plus a booster, hence the 2 different colors of H biplanes. It's given at 2 and 4 months, with an additional dose at 6 months for the 3-dose series, plus a booster at 12 to 15 months. I would have loved to have a rocket biplane as a kid, but I probably wouldn't have made it this long if I had. History of severe allergic reaction to the HIB vaccine or latex is a contraindication to vaccination, and as always, the most common adverse effects are local reactions such as pain, erythema, or swelling at the injection site. Our biplane is crashing into the sea. Guess that means we should dive on down to the pneumococcal vaccine. Streptococcus pneumoniae, aka pneumococcus, remains a leading cause of serious illness in children under 5. Immunization is helpful in preventing invasive pneumococcal disease such as meningitis and bacteremia. Pneumococcal conjugate vaccines, or PCVs, are inactivated vaccines that are made up of pneumococcal polysaccharides conjugated to a carrier protein. These carrier proteins elicit a T cell dependent memory response. In the United States, children get PCV 13, which contains polysaccharides from 13 pneumococcal serotypes. PCV 13 is a 3-dose series given at 2, 4, and 6 months with a booster at 12 to 15 months. If you're sitting there and thinking that we made that booster sub up for this sketch, just go watch The Rock with Sean Connery and Nick Cage. Actually, even if you weren't wondering about it, go watch that movie. Best study break ever. Looks like you're between a rock and a hard case. There are 3 major groups of children at increased risk of invasive pneumococcal disease. First, children who are immunocompromised, such as kids with HIV or without a spleen. Poor kid, looks like he had a bad accident recently, since he's on crutches now and ripped a hole in the spleen of his brand new jersey. Second, children with chronic diseases like heart, liver, kidney, or lung disease, represented by our chronic disease clock. And third, kids with anatomic barrier defects, such as a CSF leak or a cochlear implant. FYI, cochlea is Latin for snail, and I know that like 3 weeks after Apple sees this sketch, everybody is going to be buying their new snail pods. Just don't let them get near salt. These high-risk patients should receive additional vaccination with the 23-valent pneumococcal polysaccharide vaccine, or PPSV23. These 23 serotypes represent 85 to 90% of the serotypes that cause invasive pneumococcal disease in the U.S. That's a lot of serotypes, which is why the limited edition Pneumo 23 diver toy needs a bigger tank to hold them all. The first dose of PPSV23 is given at least 8 weeks after completion of the PCV13 series, followed by a second dose 5 years later. That ends up being around 2 years old, and again around 7 years old. Fun fact for your next trivia night. Essentially, nobody really good at their sport has ever worn number 27. To disagree with this statement, please email Ben at sketchymedical.com. That's Ben at sketchymedical.com. Contraindications to vaccine include an anaphylactic reaction after any diphtheria toxoid-containing vaccine. That's because the polysaccharides in PCV13 are conjugated to a protein just like diphtheria toxoid, which you'll recognize as our bullneck symbol from Sketchy Micro. And keep your eyes out for Anna and Phil, since, in addition to causing anaphylaxis, they're vandalizing the store. Take off your wetsuits and get ready for some bird watching. Next up, polio. Immunization against poliovirus infection represents one of the world's greatest medical achievements. The last cases of naturally occurring paralytic poliomyelitis in the United States occurred during an outbreak in an unvaccinated religious community in the 1970s. Hooray for vaccines! Thanks March of Dimes, thanks FDR! The inactivated poliovirus vaccine, or IPV, is given intramuscularly. I know we said we weren't going to mention that again, but this vaccine comes in an inactivated IM version and an oral version, which we'll talk about later. IPV is a 4-dose series given at 2 and 4 months, again at 6 to 18 months, and completed at 4 to 6 years. You may think we only made the flamingo's neck that long so that it would fill up the shelf, but it's actually based on the Lake Michigan long-necked flamingo. True story, look it up. It is worthwhile to mention that there is an oral polio vaccine, or OPV, which is used in developing countries. This live vaccine remains an important tool for controlling virus transmission due to its low cost, ease of administration, and the transmission of the vaccine virus from vaccinated children to their non-immune contacts. So that's good, but what's not good is that incredibly disturbing globe. Maxine, what were you thinking? Okay, one more not good thing. There is a risk of vaccine-associated paralytic poliomyelitis that rarely occurs among OPV recipients and among their direct contacts. Patients with B-cell immunodeficiency carry the highest risk. Thus, OPV is contraindicated in immunodeficient individuals. Man, polio is a bummer. I'm glad we've gotten rid of it. But enough of this bird safari. It's time to get a little controversial. MMR stands for measles, mumps, rubella, and the vaccine is effective in preventing all 3. There has been a dramatic decline in cases of each since the introduction of MMR in the 1960s. Unfortunately, outbreaks of measles continue to occur, mostly in unvaccinated individuals. We'll talk more about these so-called anti-vaxxers in the second vaccine sketch, so check that out for a little bit of sketchy-style myth-busting. MMR is a 2-dose series given at 12 to 15 months and 4 to 6 years. MMR is a live attenuated vaccine and is administered subcutaneously. OMG, if I could see a live Rafa concert on a submarine, I would just die. MMR can be given early to infants age 6 to 11 months prior to international travel, which is why that runway extends from 6 to 11 months. However, that early dose should not count towards the 2-dose series. You can also give those infants the vaccine in the event of a measles outbreak, represented by our outbreak Jack-in-the-Box. Why are Jack-in-the-Boxes so dang creepy? Contraindications to MMR vaccination include anaphylaxis to the vaccine or its constituents and immunodeficiency. I guess those two troublemakers went a little too far this time and got themselves banned from the store. Good riddance to that Anna-Phil axis of evil. In addition, patients who receive IV immune globulin or antibody-containing blood products should wait about 11 months before they receive the MMR vaccine. This is because these products can blunt the host response to live virus vaccines. Real talk. Why is there blood leaking out of the only locked cabinet at a kid's toy store? Between this and the horrifying Jack-in-the-Box, vaccines is starting to seem a little sinister. Tuberculosis testing should either be performed at the same visit as, or at least 4 weeks after MMR vaccine is given, as the live virus may decrease the skin test's sensitivity. The same is true for administration of other live vaccines. They should either be given on the same day as MMR or 28 days later. Wait, 28 days later. Isn't that a movie about a virus that turns everyone into zombies? I'm telling you, something is very wrong at Maxines. All right, Maxine, enough with your devilish deeds. A pox on this house. Okay, I might have gotten a bit carried away there. This actually still looks like a perfectly standard CDC-organized toy store. Anyway, let's talk pox. While varicella zoster infection is self-limited in most healthy kids, it can cause significant complications in adults, pregnant women, and immunocompromised hosts. The incidence of hospitalization and even mortality among these groups is significant. The varicella zoster vaccine, or VZV, not only prevents chickenpox infection and reduces the risk of transmission, but it also lowers the risk of shingles in children. Like MMR, VZV is a live attenuated vaccine and is administered subcutaneously. VZV is a 2-dose series, with the first dose given at 12 to 15 months and the second at 4 to 6 years. Sound familiar? This is the exact schedule for MMR. I was trying to figure out the plural of Zeus, and then I realized, dude's a god. One Zeus can be in 2 places at once. There is no plural? If necessary, like during an outbreak of varicella, the second dose can be given before 4 years old. The recommended minimum interval between doses is 3 months. Contraindications to VZV include anaphylaxis to previous dose and severe immunosuppression. These are the same groups who should not receive the MMR vaccine. Similarly, patients who have received IV blood products or immune globulin in the preceding 11 months should not receive VZV. Finally, there is an association between salicylates, natural varicella, and Rye syndrome. Thus, it is recommended that salicylates be avoided for 6 weeks after VZV. Who buys their kid a toy that says no peasants? That does not convey the right message. Up to 3% of patients who receive VZV develop a localized rash consisting of a few lesions at the injection site, while up to 5% develop a generalized varicella-like rash within 1 month of immunization. These patients should refrain from physical contact with people who are immunocompromised until the rash has resolved. One important risk of both MMR and VZV vaccines is febrile seizures. And there is an increased risk of febrile seizure when the combination MMRV is given to children aged 12 to 23 months. Let's stick with the Greek theme as we move from Zeus to the famous river horse, or Hippopotamus. Boom! Just dropped an etymology knowledge bomb. Hepatitis A is one of the most common preventable infections acquired by travelers. Humans are the only known reservoir for Hep A, so eradication should be entirely possible. And sure enough, since the introduction of the Hep A vaccine in 1995, the U.S. has seen a 95% decline in the rate of infection. Hepatitis A is a two-dose series given between ages 12 to 24 months with a minimum of 6 months between doses. Children who will be traveling internationally can receive a dose at as early as 6 months of age, but it should not count towards their 3-dose series. Wave goodbye to those hippos. It's time to take on the big bad flu. Infection with influenza virus is generally self-limited and uncomplicated among healthy kids, but it can be associated with severe morbidity and mortality in both healthy children and those at increased risk of severe illness. Why a paper airplane, you ask? Because it flew into that cake. Get it? Flew? The vaccine changes annually, as the CDC and WHO track the influenza virus worldwide to monitor disease activity and predict the necessary vaccine components. There are two major forms of the vaccine. First is the inactivated quadrivalent vaccine, so named IIV4, which is given intramuscularly. The second is a live attenuated quadrivalent vaccine, aka Flumist, which is given intranasally. Here's a question. Why do vaccines have to be so unpleasant? Like, don't want a shot in the arm? Okay, take this jet of cold fluid in your nose. Somebody should make a vaccine that can be taken as ice cream. On the bright side, guess who has 2 thumbs and also has 2 tickets to the Rafa Live concert? Oh, I guess you can't see me pointing at myself. Never mind. Children 2 or older have the option of getting the intranasal flu vaccine. IIV4 is the vaccine of choice for children under 2 years, as well as for those with asthma or medical conditions which make them high risk for influenza complications. For all first-timers under 9 years old, influenza vaccination is a 2-dose series given 4 weeks apart. After that, it's given once annually. Here's something I just thought of. Thank God we never developed a tradition of vaccinating people on their birthdays. What if the thing to do was stick you right at the end of the song? Happy birthday to you, stab. There are some patients who require extra consideration prior to administration of IIV4, which include a thimerosal sensitivity, acute febrile illness, and a history of Guillain-Barré syndrome within 6 weeks of previous vaccination. That's all kinds of ominous, but man, that is one cute, huggy Guillain-Barré. Contraindications to the Flumist preparation include history of an allergic reaction to the vaccine, recent salicylates, antivirals within 48 hours, compromised immunity, and close contact with immunosuppressed individuals. At last, we found where the reject toys go. I'm not sure how a rubber ball breaks exactly, but those 2 sunballs next to that broken viral capsule will remind you not to give Flumist to anyone who's had antivirals within 48 hours. Had enough of the vaccines? Good news and bad news. Good news, you're done with this sketch. More good news, there's a whole nother one about vaccines for older kids. Plot twist, there's no bad news! Before we get to the second sketch, let's quickly rifle through the shelves at Maxine's one last time. The hepatitis B vaccine is a 3-dose series given at birth, 1 to 2 months, and 6 to 18 months. The rotavirus vaccine is a 2 to 3-dose series given at 2 months and 4 months, as well as 6 months if doing the 3-dose vaccine. The DTaP vaccine is a 5-dose series given at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 15 to 18 months, and 4 to 6 years. The Hib vaccine is a 3-dose series given at 2 months, 4 months, and 6 months, plus a booster at 12 to 15 months. There are 2 pneumococcal vaccines. All children get the 13-valent PCV13, which is a 3-dose series given at 2 months, 4 months, and 6 months, plus a booster at 12 to 15 months. There is also a 23-valent vaccine, PPSV23, which is a 2-dose series given around 2 and around 7 years old. The polio vaccine is a 4-dose series given at 2 months, 4 months, 6 to 18 months, and 4 to 6 years. The MMR vaccine is a 2-dose series given at 12 to 15 months and 4 to 6 years. The VZV vaccine is a 2-dose series given at 12 to 15 months and 4 to 6 years. The hepatitis A vaccine is a 2-dose series given at between 12 and 24 months with at least 6 months between doses. The influenza vaccine is given annually after an initial 2-dose series given 4 weeks apart. There are 2 versions of the flu vaccine, an inactivated IM version and a live attenuated intranasal version that should only be given to kids over 2. Alright, that's it. We've made it safely to the end of the first vat. Oh, God, Anna and Phil are back. Oh, no. No, don't choke him with that flamingo. God, I knew the Lake Michigan long-neck flamingo toy was a mistake. But the biplanes, those are expensive. Well, good thing we have insurance. At least it's just some broken glass and Oh, my God. I give up. I'm getting the heck out of here.